Hi, Brian once again. After some downtime, I finally got back on my feet and I've decided I really need to finish my Blood Angels army. And no Blood Angels army is complete without the Sanguinary Guard. Now I have to admit I'm a bit of a Primaris snob. It's not about the stats, but rather the scale. So I decided to make some custom Sanguinary Guard. As I explained in a previous video, I made these guys way back in January 2022. Long before I started making YouTube videos. Though I can't show you how I made them, but I can point you towards the guide that I followed. I'll make sure to link it in the description below. That guide will give you a listing of all the parts that you'll need and some new ideas. I decided to use standard Sanguinary Guard torsos on top of Adeptus Custodes Legs. It's a really simple modification. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments below if you want any more information. For this video, I'm going to be focusing primarily on how I painted the gold armour and a few other things. For things like blood gems and bolters, I'll be using the same recipes that I've used in my previous Blood Angels videos. I'll link them in the cards above and you can check them out. One last thing before we get started, I just wanted to take a few seconds and say a very big thank you to everyone who subscribed to my channel. So I recently hit 260 subscribers and I know to some people that may not seem a lot, but to me it really is, and I just can't express how much I appreciate everyone taking the time to watch these videos and for all your positive feedback. I really look forward to making more of these videos, and if you find any of the content useful, please feel free to leave a comment or subscribe. Now, let's get started. I'm not a fan of the bright gold recipe used by Citadel for these models. So I've started with my models primed black as usual, and I've decided to use scale 75 black gold. These paints are airbrush suitable as long as you dilute them. So I've started with 2 drops of Vallejo Flow Improver. This is always a good idea if you're airbrushing with metallics. And then I start by thinning my paint down in a ratio of 1:1. That still seemed a little thick, so I added some more thinner and ended up with a ratio of 2 drops of thinner to 1 drop of paint. This gives me a consistency rather like milk. You can make it thinner, but just remember that if you do, you're going to have to reduce your airbrush pressure in order to compensate. So I'm spraying here at about 20 psi, and this paint just glides on. It's beautiful. This is about the most relaxing base coat I've ever done. This range from scale 75 is a pleasure to work with, and it just leaves such a lovely antique finish. I decided to keep the heads separate for now and assemble them later. To add some shading to the gold and get that tarnished look, I'm going to shade with Citadel Agrax Earthshade, direct from the airbrush. I'm going to turn my pressure down to 10 psi, and I'm going to angle the model so he's almost upside down, and spray gently. Even at this pressure, the wash is going to pour through the airbrush, so I keep it gentle, brief, and I aim for all the underside parts of the Mini, and that includes the inside of the legs, and of course, the underside of the heads. Next up, I load my airbrush with Citadel Seraphim Sepia. I don't see any reason why you can't brush this on. I just happened to have the airbrush out and I thought it would give me a nice thin coat, which is all you need at this stage. I didn't want it to pull. Once dry, I gave him a quick coat of varnish just to help seal that in place. Doesn't really matter what type of varnish you use here. I decided to test 2 different types to see which one I liked. On the left is Vallejo Polyurethane Gloss, and on the right is Vallejo Polyurethane Matte. Vallejo Polyurethane Matte Varnish has much more of a satin finish, and I really like this. Remember, it's all personal preference, and whatever you decide is going to look great to you, and really at the end of the day, that's all that matters. It's one of the best things about this hobby. So off camera, I've gone ahead and given all the details their base coats. I'll list the paints I've used in the description below. Once that was done, I gave each model 2 coats of Vallejo Polyurethane Gloss Varnish, which is going to help me shade the white areas and the wings. The angel wings have just been primed with Vallejo Polyurethane White Primer. That's all they need because now they're going to get a coat of Citadel Contrast Apothecary White. So I take care not to overload my brush and I paint directly into the recess of each feather and at the top arch of each wing. The gloss varnish really helps here. If I had a steady hand, I guess I could do this on the white wings on the shoulder pads, but instead I'm going to prepare an oil wash. Here I'm using Winton Payne's Grey. This colour out of the tube is bluish grey and it's ideal for white. I will make a video dedicated to oil washing next, but for now I wanted to show the kind of consistency that you're aiming for. This makes shading the feather motifs on the shoulder pads super easy. Now this is going to appear dark at first, but once it's dry it lightens up a little bit and it's going to look amazing. On the angel wings I decided to apply this to the arch along the top and along the first row of tiny feathers. This is to create some depth and help them look more three-dimensional. I left that to dry overnight and in the morning sealed that with another coat of varnish. I did varnish one model with AK Ultramatte here, just to show you the effect in case you do prefer it, but for me it's just too flat on a fully metallic model. Before I start highlighting the detail, I'm going to paint any areas I want metallic with scale 75 black metal. To highlight white, I'm going to start by applying several thin layers of Citadel Ulthuan Grey. This is a layer paint and it doesn't cover very well, and there's just no shortcuts here. I just have to get comfortable and paint each feather several times until I get a smooth finish. If you're following this guide and you manage to keep the apothecary white to just the recesses, this stage is going to be a lot easier for you and you'll need fewer coats. Then, with some Vallejo Game Dead White, I paint the outer edge of each feather. As a final touch, I'm going to edge highlight the arch of each angel wing with Vallejo Game Dead White. I then used the same process for all of the white feather motifs on the main body of each miniature. This next stage for me was by far the most complicated, as it required me to glaze with a metallic paint, not the easiest thing in the world to do. I started by thinning down some scale 75 black gold. I thinned this much more than I would for a normal glaze. Then, making sure I had absolutely no excess moisture on my brush, I stippled this onto the raised armour panels that would catch the light. This part really did take all my patience. I had to proceed so slowly, allowing each layer to dry fully before I proceeded to the next. It doesn't take much to have an effect, but you can also easily overdo it, so I just had to have patience. I think it helps to bring a little bit of life back into the gold base coat. Once I had the squad at a stage where I was happy, I then brightened up the armour even more by giving everything an edge highlight of scale 75 Elven Gold. This is a really nice, rich and warm gold, and it complements the base coat really well. The trickiest part for me was highlighting this Aquila on the legs, but it's really worth it. A tip here for mistakes is to keep a wet brush in the side. If you do make a mistake and the paint does spill over, you can quickly brush it out with some clean water. I then painted some surfaces to make them stand out even more, like the ab plates on the chest, plates holding the Angelus bolters to the arms, and the rims of the shoulder pads. The faces on the helmet were painted directly with Elven Gold, only painting the raised areas like the nose, cheeks, chin, and the ornaments on top. Now that it's all starting to come together, it's time to attach the heads and have a look at the overall effect. I am really pleased with how these turned out. This is a really nice, antique, battle-worn gold effect. Next, I went ahead and I based all the models and started to paint in the details. As I mentioned at the start, I've covered this in previous videos, so I've linked these here in the top right. To create a jetpack glow effect, I painted the exhausts with a thin coat of Citadel layer Lothorn Blue. For some shading, I added a thin wash of Citadel Drakenhof Nightshade, and then added a white dot in the centre with Corax White. After giving that some time to dry, I took a small brush and I gently dry brushed Lothorn Blue around the edges of the exhaust and the rim of the backpack. Finally, I gave it a very gentle dry brush of some Vallejo Dead White. This time I tried to stick directly to the edges so that I didn't cover up the previous dry brush. The power swords were my biggest compromise for this squad. I wanted to glaze them like I had with other miniatures in the past. I know I can do it, and I did try, but I just couldn't seem to get it quite right this time. So I decided to compromise by giving the swords a basic split tone look. I based each one with Citadel Lothorn Blue, and then shaded the outer areas with Vallejo Heavy Blue. I then edge highlight it with Lothorn Blue, and give it a secondary highlight of Vallejo Dead White. I don't think it looks too bad, it's a pretty good compromise. And finally, because these guys are painted, plastic glue would damage the paint, so I used super glue to attach the wings. And then they all got several coats of Vallejo polyurethane matte varnish. And with that, I was done. And there we have it, a squad of easy to modify, Primaris sized Sanguinary Guard that really stand out in the battlefield from their chapter brothers. All I need now is a custom Commander Dante. So I'm really happy with how these guys turned out. I mean, there's a few more things I could do on them to bring out the detail, and I might return later in the future, but for now, I cannot wait to get these guys deployed onto the battlefield. So I hope this video has given you some ideas for painting your own Sanguinary Guard. If it has, please consider subscribing or leaving a comment below. I'd be really interested to hear what you think. So until next time, as always, enjoy your painting, have fun, and I'll see you soon.